Our world is shaped by these massive, invisible forces. And today, we're going to dive into one of the most powerful ones out there, a giant river hidden inside the ocean that basically acts as our planet's climate engine. All right, so here's a puzzle for you. Think about this. London is on the same latitude as frigid Labrador, Canada. But one has these lovely green parks, and the other, well, it's known for its icy landscapes. So what gives? What explains that huge difference? Well, the answer is this incredibly powerful ocean current called the Gulf Stream. And trust me, it's the key to understanding our entire global climate. So to really wrap our heads around that puzzle, we need to zoom out a bit. See, the Gulf Stream is actually just one piece of a much, much bigger system. We're talking about the global oceans conveyor belt. It's like a planetary climate machine. Think of the Earth's oceans and winds as this enormous heating and cooling system, right? Their main job is pretty simple. Stop the equator from getting way too hot and the poles from getting way too cold. And how do they do that? By constantly moving heat around the globe. It's this nonstop motion that gives us the climates we're also familiar with.
Okay, so the scientific term for this whole system sounds a bit complicated. It's thermohaline circulation, but really, it's super simple when you break it down. Thermo, that just means temperature, and haline, that just means salt. So this entire global engine is driven by just two things: how warm the water is and how salty it is. That's it.
And the physics behind it? It's actually really straightforward. Warm water, especially if it's less salty, is less dense. It's lighter, so it rises up toward the surface. But cold, salty water, that's much denser, it's way heavier, so it sinks deep down into the ocean. And believe it or not, this simple act of rising and sinking is what powers the entire global conveyor belt. Okay, so with that basic principle in mind, now we can zoom back in and follow the star of our show, the Gulf Stream itself. It's a huge part of this conveyor belt, and let me tell you, its journey is nothing short of epic. And the sheer scale we're talking about here is just staggering. The Gulf Stream moves 100 million cubic meters of water every single second. To put that into perspective for you, that is more, way more, than all of the world's rivers combined. It is literally a river inside the ocean. So how does this journey actually work? Well, it all starts down in the Gulf of Mexico, where the water heats up to a really warm 30 degrees Celsius. Then, thanks to the Earth's rotation and the winds, it gets pushed across the Atlantic towards Europe. Along the way, it's releasing all that heat into the atmosphere. As it cools down, evaporation makes the water saltier and denser. And then finally, when it gets up near Greenland, it's become so heavy that it takes this massive plunge, deep, deep into the ocean. And this sinking action? This is the absolutely crucial part. Seriously, it's like someone pulled a giant drain plug in the North Atlantic. This sinking creates a huge void that just constantly pulls more warm water up from the south to fill the gap. And that pull, that is the very engine that drives this entire current. Okay, so now we get to the big question. Why does this all matter so much? Well, all of that movement, all of that heat being shuffled across the ocean, it has a huge direct impact on the lives of millions and millions of people.
There's a really perfect analogy for what the Gulf Stream does for Europe. It's basically a giant natural heat pump, just constantly pumping all that warmth from the tropics right up to the north. And let's just try to put a number on that for a second. The amount of heat the Gulf Stream delivers to Europe's coast is, well, it's mind-boggling. Get this. To generate that same amount of warmth, you would need 1 million nuclear power plants. That's an almost unimaginable amount of energy.
So what's the real-world result of all that energy? Well, on average, Europe is a full 5 to 10 degrees Celsius warmer than it would be without the Gulf Stream. This, right here, is why London has its green parks, while Labrador has ice. Without this heat pump, Europe would be facing long, incredibly harsh winters and a landscape that would be completely transformed. Now, for thousands of years, this whole system has been chugging along, relatively stable. But now we're seeing a major plot twist in the story, and it's a twist being driven by our changing climate. Okay, so here's the chain reaction that scientists are really worried about. As the planet warms up, Greenland's massive ice sheets are melting, and that's pouring huge amounts of fresh water into the North Atlantic. What's the problem? Well, all that fresh water dilutes the ocean's salt content, making it less dense. And if the water isn't dense enough, it's not heavy enough to sink. And if the water doesn't sink, that pull we talked about, the engine, it just stops. The whole system weakens, and it could even shut down completely. And the implication here is pretty darn clear. If that engine in the North Atlantic starts to sputter and Europe's heat pump switches off, the consequences for its climate could be incredibly dramatic and happen really fast. So, what does the future hold? Well, to get an idea of what might happen next, we can actually look to the past. Turns out, Earth's own history holds some really important clues. See, we know this system can shut down because it has happened before. Way back during the last ice age, a massive flood of meltwater did exactly what scientists are afraid of today. It completely paralyzed the current. And the result? It plunged the northern hemisphere into a deep freeze. Now, after that, the system eventually stabilized. But it's becoming very clear that things are starting to change once again. Now, look, climate scientists have different models and different ideas about exactly how and when these changes will unfold. There's still a lot of debate, but they all agree on one absolutely critical point. This incredibly complex and incredibly vital system is changing. And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? For pretty much all of recent human history, we've been able to rely on a relatively stable climate system. We now know, for a fact, that system is changing. So the big unanswered question is, into what?